Rain tapped out a rhythm against the garage windows, like nature's own Morse code. I was elbow deep in a busted alternator when I heard Brielle's voice drifting from the kitchen. Laughter, too intimate, too soft for a Tuesday night phone call with her mother. If infidelity had a ringtone, it would be her giggle. I'm Evan Mercer, 38 years old, owner of what used to be Riverton's most trusted auto repair shop before the economy went sideways and everyone started driving their rust buckets to the chain stores. These days, I fix cars in my garage and pretend my marriage isn't falling apart faster than a transmission on its last legs. The laughter stopped. I wiped my hands on an old rag and stepped closer to the door connecting the garage to our kitchen. Brielle's voice was hushed now, conspiratorial. No, he's busy with that stupid car again. He won't come inside for hours. My stomach twisted. 38 years on this planet, and I still felt like that awkward kid getting picked last for dodgeball. But this time, the game was my own marriage. I pushed through the door, making enough noise to announce my presence. Brielle spun around, phone pressed to her ear, eyes wide like a deer caught in headlights. I have to go, she whispered into the phone and hung up. Working late again? I asked, nodding toward her business suit. She was still dressed like she'd just left the law firm, though it was nearly 10 o'clock. Client emergency. The lie rolled off her tongue, smooth as silk. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. Brielle Torren, she'd kept her maiden name for professional reasons, was Riverton's rising star attorney. While my business crumbled like old concrete, hers soared. She handled real estate deals, divorces, and apparently late-night phone calls that made her giggle like a schoolgirl. Which client? I asked. You wouldn't know them. She moved past me toward the stairs. I'm exhausted. Going to bed. I watched her climb those stairs, noting how she clutched her phone like a lifeline. Something was wrong. Had been wrong for months. The way she looked at me had changed. Like I was furniture she was tired of dusting around. The next morning, I found it. Brielle had rushed out early for another emergency meeting, leaving her coffee half-finished, and her usual tornado of papers scattered across the kitchen counter. I was cleaning up when I noticed the cabinet door above the coffee maker hanging slightly open. We'd lived in this house for 15 years. That cabinet stuck. You had to really slam it to get it closed properly. Brielle knew that. Everyone knew that. I reached up and opened it fully. Behind the sugar packets and spare coffee filters, tucked into the corner like a guilty secret, was a small gift box. Inside, a men's watch. Expensive. The kind I couldn't afford even when my shop was thriving. Underneath the watch, folded neatly, was a note written on cream-colored paper in handwriting I didn't recognize. Last night was perfect. Next time, no interruptions. Can't wait to see you wearing this. P. I read it 3 times. The words didn't change. P. Porter, maybe? I knew a Porter Keller from around town, real estate hotshot, drove a Porsche, had the kind of smile that made people want to either trust him with their life savings or punch him in the face. My hands shook as I folded the note and put everything back exactly where I'd found it. Then I sat at our kitchen table and stared at the cabinet for what felt like hours. 15 years of marriage, 16-year-old daughter, a house with a mortgage that kept me awake at night. And now this. I could confront her, demand explanations, cry maybe, beg her to work things out, or I could do something else entirely. The front door slammed. Dad? Lacey's voice echoed through the house. Our daughter, home from school, sounding annoyed about something. These days, she always sounded annoyed. Kitchen, I called back. She appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, phone in hand like it was surgically attached. Lacey had inherited her mother's sharp features and her talent for making me feel invisible. Mom said you might drive me to Jessica's house later. She didn't look up from her phone. Did she now? I glanced at the cabinet. When did you talk to your mother? She texted me during lunch. Lacey finally looked at me, and I saw Brielle's calculating expression reflected in our daughter's face. She said she might be late again tonight. Another client thing. Another client thing. Right. Sure, I'll drive you. I stood up, decision crystallizing in my mind like ice forming on a windshield. But first, I need to make a stop. That evening, I drove to the fitness center on Maple Street. Not the fancy country club where Brielle's law firm partners worked out, but the middle-tier gym where ambitious professionals went to see and be seen without paying country club prices. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I sat in my truck across the street for 20 minutes before I saw him. Porter Keller stepping out of his silver Porsche like he owned the world. Tall, broad shoulders, the kind of tan that came from golf courses and vacation homes. Everything I wasn't. I waited until he was inside, then I followed. The gym was all chrome and mirrors, pop music pumping through speakers, the smell of disinfectant and desperation hanging in the air. I spotted Porter at the weight machines, wearing expensive workout gear and checking his phone between sets. I walked up to him slowly, deliberately. When he looked up, I smiled. "Porter Keller, right?" He nodded, wariness creeping into his expression. "Do I know you?" "Evan Mercer?" I extended my hand. "Brielle's husband." The color drained from his face, but he shook my hand anyway. His grip was firm, confident. The grip of a man who'd never had to worry about making rent. "Oh, Evan, nice to finally meet you." His voice was steady, but I caught the slight tremor. "Brielle talks about you all the time." "Does she?" I kept smiling. "What does she say?" Porter glanced around the gym like he was looking for escape routes. "Just, family stuff." "Family stuff?" I nodded slowly. "Well, that's nice. Really nice." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Tell me, Porter, do you like surprises?" Before he could answer, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with his mouth hanging open. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Brielle, listening to her breathe, watching the ceiling fan turn lazy circles in the darkness. She'd come home at 11:30, claiming she'd grabbed dinner with colleagues after the client meeting. She was lying. I knew it. She knew I knew it. But we both pretended everything was normal. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went to my computer. I had work to do. By dawn, I had Porter's gym locker number. Amazing what you could learn by buying a day pass and watching people punch in their combinations. Even more amazing what you could accomplish when you had nothing left to lose. I waited until the next evening, when the gym was busy enough for me to blend in but not so crowded that I'd be noticed. Porter's locker was in the back row, away from the main traffic flow. I left the package wedged behind his gym bag where he'd find it immediately. Inside, the watch, a photocopy of the note, and my own message written on plain white paper. "Surprise. We need to talk. Soon. E." Then I went home and waited. Brielle's phone started buzzing around 8 o'clock. She was in the shower, so I watched it vibrate against the bathroom counter through the open door. Unknown number. Then another call, then another. When she got out, wrapped in her terry cloth robe, she grabbed the phone immediately. I pretended to read a magazine while she checked her messages, but I could see her reflection in the dresser mirror. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Everything okay?" I asked without looking up. "Fine." But her voice cracked slightly. "Just work stuff." "Work stuff. Right." She disappeared into the walk-in closet with her phone. I heard her voice, low and urgent, but couldn't make out the words. When she came back out, she was dressed in jeans and a sweater. "I need to run out for a few minutes," she said. "Emergency." "Another one?" I looked at her directly now. "Lot of emergencies lately." "It's complicated." She avoided my eyes. "I'll be back soon." After she left, I sat in our bedroom and smiled for the first time in months. The game had begun, and for once, I was the one making the moves. My phone rang around midnight. Brielle's number. "Evan?" Her voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk." "Now? It's pretty late." "Now." She was waiting in the kitchen when I came downstairs, still wearing the jeans and sweater, her hair messed up like she'd been running her hands through it. The cabinet above the coffee maker was open. Empty. "Why were you going through my things?" she demanded. I sat down at the table and looked at her calmly. "What things?" "You know what things." Her voice was rising. "You had no right—" "To clean our kitchen?" I interrupted. "To put away dishes in our house?" "Don't play games with me, Evan." "Games?" I stood up slowly. "Who's playing games here, Brielle?" She stared at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Fear. Good. "I don't know what you think you found." "I think," I said quietly, "that you should be very careful about what you say next." We stood there in our kitchen, the space where we'd shared thousands of meals and conversations, where we'd planned our future and raised our daughter, and I felt something fundamental shift between us. The balance of power had changed. Brielle's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then back at me. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's just getting started." The next morning, Brielle was gone before I woke up. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Had to leave early for depositions. Would be late again tonight. The note was written in the same careful handwriting she used for legal documents, every letter controlled and precise. I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Lacey stumbled downstairs around 7:30, already dressed for school, earbuds in, lost in whatever teenage drama was unfolding on her phone screen. "Mom left early," I said. She shrugged without looking up. "She's been doing that a lot." "Doesn't bother you?" Another shrug. "She's working, making money. Someone has to." The dig landed exactly where she'd aimed it. Lacey had inherited more than just her mother's looks. She'd gotten the talent for finding the soft spots and pressing hard. "Your mother and I need to talk to you about some things," I said. "Soon." That got her attention. She pulled out one earbud and looked at me with suspicious eyes. "What kind of things?" "Family things." "Are you getting divorced?" The question hit me like a sucker punch. "Why would you ask that?" "Please. I'm not stupid." She rolled her eyes. "You guys barely talk anymore. Mom's never home. You sleep in the garage half the time." She paused. "Plus, Jessica's parents got divorced last year, and it was exactly like this." I stared at my daughter, this almost adult who'd been watching our marriage disintegrate with the clinical detachment of a scientist observing lab rats. "Would that bother you?" I asked. "If we got divorced?" Lacey considered this seriously. "Depends. Who would I live with?" "Who would you want to live with?" "Mom." No hesitation. "She's got the better job, better house, better everything." Better everything. Right. After Lacey left for school, I drove to Iron Ring Boxing Gym on the south side of town. It wasn't much to look at from the outside. Converted warehouse with painted-over windows and a neon sign that flickered when it rained. But inside was my salvation. Miles Heron owned the place. We'd been friends since high school, back when he was Golden Gloves champion, and I was the smart kid who helped him pass algebra. Miles never made it to the pros, but he'd turned Iron Ring into something special, a place where working-class guys could hit things legally and feel like warriors for an hour or two. I found him in the back office, surrounded by paperwork and empty coffee cups. Miles was built like a fire hydrant, short, thick, and impossible to move when he didn't want to be moved. His face looked like it had been carved from granite with a dull chisel. "You look like garbage," he said, without looking up from his invoices. "Thanks. I feel worse." "Brielle?" I nodded and slumped into the chair across from his desk. Miles knew about my marriage troubles, had known for months. probably before I'd admitted them to myself. Found out she's cheating. Miles set down his pen and looked at me directly. You sure? I told him about the watch, the note, the late-night phone calls. Miles listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. Porter Keller, he said when I finished. Real estate guy. Drives the Porsche. You know him? Know of him. Comes in here sometimes, acts like he owns the place. Hits on the female trainers, tips big to make sure everyone knows he's got money. Miles cracked his knuckles. Want me to have a conversation with him? No. The answer surprised me with its firmness. I want to handle this myself. Evan. I'm tired of being the guy who gets rescued, Miles. Tired of being the victim. I stood up. I want to learn how to fight back. Miles studied me for a long moment. Fighting back and fighting smart are two different things. Then teach me both. He smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. Now you're talking. For the next 2 hours, Miles put me through the basics. How to throw a punch without breaking my hand. How to take a hit without falling down. How to use leverage and positioning when you're outweighed and outmatched. Revenge is like boxing, he said as I worked the heavy bag. It's not about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being smarter, making your opponent make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that expose them. Make them show their true face to the world. By the time I left Iron Ring, my hands were raw and my shoulders ached, but my head was clearer than it had been in months. I had a plan forming, rough around the edges but solid at the core. I stopped at the electronics store on my way home and bought a small digital recorder. Then I went to the library and spent an hour researching Ohio divorce law and asset protection. Knowledge was ammunition, and I was building an arsenal. That evening, Brielle came home around 9 o'clock. She looked tired, stressed, like someone who'd spent the day putting out fires. How was your day? I asked from the couch, where I was pretending to watch television. Long. She kicked off her heels and rubbed her feet. Yours? Productive. I muted the TV and looked at her. I've been thinking about us. About our marriage. She froze. What about it? I think we need to be honest with each other. Really honest. Honest about what? I stood up and walked over to her. She didn't back away, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands clenched at her sides. About what we want, I said. About whether this is working anymore. Evan, because if it's not working, if you're not happy, then maybe we should talk about alternatives. She stared at me, trying to read my expression. What kind of alternatives? Separation, divorce, starting over. The words hung between us like smoke. I watched her face carefully, looking for tells. The slight widening of her eyes. The way her tongue darted out to wet her lips. The almost imperceptible relaxation in her posture. Relief. She was relieved. Is that what you want? She asked carefully. I want you to be happy, Brielle. If being married to me doesn't make you happy anymore, then we should probably face that. She was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle. Maybe we should think about it. Take some time to figure things out. Maybe we should. That night she slept in the guest room, said she needed space to think. I lay in our bed, staring at the ceiling, and smiled in the darkness. The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Brielle continued her pattern of early departures and late returns. I went to Iron Ring every morning, learning to channel 15 years of frustration into something useful. Lacey moved between us like a diplomat in a war zone, careful not to take sides too obviously. On Thursday, I followed Brielle. I'd never done anything like it before. The idea of spying on my own wife felt sleazy, desperate, but desperate times, as they say. She left the house at 7:30, claiming an early meeting with a client. I waited 5 minutes, then got in my truck and drove toward downtown. I found her car in the parking lot of Riverside Diner, a little place on the outskirts of town that served decent coffee and minded its own business. Through the window, I could see her sitting in a corner booth. Across from her sat Porter Keller. They weren't touching, weren't doing anything that would look inappropriate to a casual observer. But I could see the intimacy in their body language, the way they leaned toward each other, the soft smiles and meaningful glances. I sat in my truck and watched them for 20 minutes. When they got up to leave, Porter reached across and squeezed Brielle's hand. She squeezed back. That afternoon, I went to see a lawyer. Janet Morrison had handled the legal work when I'd incorporated my repair shop. She was in her 60s, sharp as a razor, with silver hair and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that made people tell her the truth whether they wanted to or not. "Divorce?" she said, after I'd explained the situation. "You sure that's what you want?" "I'm sure my wife is having an affair. I'm sure she's planning to leave me anyway. I want to be prepared." Janet leaned back in her chair and studied me. "Prepared for what?" "To protect myself, my assets, my rights as a father. Your assets." She glanced at the financial documents I'd brought. "Evan, I'm going to be blunt here. You don't have a lot of assets to protect. The house has negative equity. Your business is barely breaking even. Your retirement account has about enough in it to buy a decent used car." "What about her assets?" "What about them? Anything she earned during the marriage is marital property. But anything you earned is too. It cuts both ways." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "So she gets half of nothing, and I get half of everything?" "Essentially, yes. Plus, she's the higher earner now, so there might be spousal support issues." "Spousal support? She's the one cheating." Janet sighed. "Ohio is a no-fault state, Evan. Adultery might affect asset distribution in extreme cases, but it's not the automatic game-changer people think it is." I left Janet's office feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. 15 years of marriage, and I was going to walk away with less than nothing. Brielle would get the house, half my business, and probably alimony. She'd get to start her new life with Porter while I rebuilt from scratch at 38, unless I changed the game entirely. That evening, Brielle announced she was going out with friends from work. Girls' night, she called it. Needed to decompress from a stressful week. "Which friends?" I asked. "You don't know them. New associates at the firm." Another lie, smooth as silk. After she left, I called Miles. "I need a favor," I said. "What kind of favor?" "The kind that requires following someone without being seen." Miles was quiet for a moment. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure." "Where do you want me to follow her?" I gave him the details. Brielle's car, her usual routes, the places she might go. Miles listened without judgment, the way good friends do when you're about to do something stupid but necessary. "Call me when you know where she ends up," I said. "And then what?" "Then we see how much she really wants this divorce." The call came at 10:30. Miles had followed Brielle to Porter's apartment complex on the north side of town. "Upscale place," he said, "the kind with a doorman and valet parking." "She's still inside," he said. "Been there about an hour." "Can you see his apartment from the street?" "Third floor, corner unit. Lights are on." I thanked Miles and hung up. Then I got in my truck and drove to Porter's building. It was exactly the kind of place I'd expected, all glass and steel and artificial elegance. The kind of building that said, "I've made it," in letters 10 feet tall. I parked across the street and looked up at the corner unit. The lights were on, just like Miles had said. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. I sat there for 2 hours, watching my marriage officially end in a stranger's apartment. When Brielle finally came out, she looked relaxed, happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. She practically floated to her car. I followed her home, staying far enough back to avoid detection. She beat me there by 5 minutes, just enough time to change clothes and pretend she'd been home all evening. When I walked through the front door, she was in the kitchen making tea, wearing pajamas and a robe. "How was girls' night?" I asked. "Good. We went to that new wine bar downtown." She didn't look at me. "How was your evening?" "Quiet. Watched some TV. Went to bed early." We were both lying. Both knew the other was lying. Both pretending everything was normal. It was almost funny. "Brielle," I said. "Yes?" "When you're ready to talk about our marriage, really talk, let me know." She looked at me then, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "Okay," she said quietly. I kissed her forehead, tasting lies and betrayal and 15 years of shared history. "Good night," I said. "Good night." I went upstairs to our bedroom, but I didn't go to sleep. Instead, I sat at my computer and began planning the destruction of my wife's new life, one careful step at a time. Friday morning brought rain and revelation. I woke up to find Brielle already gone. Another early meeting, according to the note she'd left. But this time, she'd made a mistake. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. I stared at it for a full minute, wrestling with the last shreds of my conscience. Spying on your wife's computer crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But then I thought about Porter's apartment, about the shadows behind those curtains, about the way she'd lied to my face for months. I opened the laptop. Her email was still logged in. I scrolled through recent messages, looking for anything that might give me ammunition. Most of it was work-related. Contracts, client communications, legal briefs. But buried in her personal folder, I found what I was looking for. An email thread with her sister Monica, dated 3 weeks ago. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine," Brielle had written. "Evan's a good man, but he's not the man I married. He's given up. On his business, on himself, on us. I feel like I'm drowning in his disappointment." Monica's response: "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know. There's someone else, someone who makes me feel alive again, but Evan doesn't deserve this. He deserves honesty." "Then be honest. It's not that simple. There's Lacey to think about, the house, everything we've built together. If I leave him now, especially with his business failing, it'll destroy him." "So you're going to destroy yourself instead?" The conversation continued for several more exchanges, Brielle pouring out her guilt and confusion, Monica offering sisterly advice and support. Reading it felt like watching surgery performed on my own heart. But it was the final email in the thread that made my hands shake. "I've made my decision," Brielle had written. "I'm going to ask Evan for a separation. Porter thinks we should wait until after the Riverside development deal closes. He doesn't want any personal drama affecting his business. But I can't wait much longer. The lies are eating me alive. The Riverside development deal. I knew that project, a massive residential complex Porter's company was building on the old industrial site by the lake. The kind of deal that could make or break a career in real estate. I closed the laptop and sat back in my chair, mind racing. Porter wasn't just stealing my wife. He was using her as a convenient distraction while he focused on his business interests. When the deal closed and his commission was secure, then he'd be ready to play house with Brielle. How romantic. I spent the morning researching the Riverside project. Public records showed Porter's company had leveraged everything on this deal: loans, investments, reputation. If it fell through, he'd be ruined. Interesting. Around noon, I drove to the construction site. It was impressive, hundreds of acres of cleared land, foundations already poured for the first phase of houses, signs everywhere advertising luxury living on Lake Erie and Porter Development building dreams. I parked near the sales trailer and watched the activity. Workers, supervisors, city inspectors coming and going. Porter himself showed up around 1 o'clock, driving his Porsche like he was auditioning for a car commercial. He spent an hour in the trailer, then came out looking stressed. He made several phone calls, pacing back and forth, gesturing angrily. Whatever was happening with his dream project, it wasn't going smoothly. That afternoon, I paid a visit to City Hall. Building permits? The clerk, a tired-looking woman named Dolores, peered at me over her reading glasses. For which property? I gave her the address of the Riverside development. She disappeared into the back office and returned with a thick file. Is this information public record? I asked. Most of it, yes. Permits, inspections, variance requests. What are you looking for specifically? Just curious about the project. I live in the area. Dolores spread the papers across the counter. Well, it's been interesting, I'll give you that. They've had to request 3 different variances for environmental issues. Something about soil contamination from the old factory. EPA's been sniffing around. EPA? That sounds serious? Could be. Depends on what they find. If the contamination is worse than expected, the whole project could be shut down pending cleanup. We've seen it before. I thanked Dolores and left City Hall with a smile on my face. Porter's dream project was sitting on a potential environmental nightmare. All it would take was the right person asking the right questions to bring the whole thing crashing down. That evening, Brielle came home early for once. She seemed nervous, fidgety, like someone working up courage for an unpleasant conversation. "Evan," she said as I was finishing dinner. "Can we talk?" Of course. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd brought Lacey home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated Christmas mornings and argued about money and made love on lazy Sunday afternoons. Now it felt like a courtroom. "I've been thinking about what you said," Brielle began, "about being honest with each other." "And?" She took a deep breath. "I think we both know our marriage isn't working anymore. We've grown apart, become different people." "Have we?" "Yes, and I think maybe we should consider a trial separation, some time apart to figure out what we really want." I nodded slowly, like I was considering this for the first time. "How long a separation?" "I don't know. A few months, maybe. Long enough to get some perspective." "And where would you go?" "I could stay with Monica for a while, or get an apartment downtown, closer to work." "What about Lacey?" "She could stay here with you during the week, spend weekends with me. We'd work it out." I was quiet for a long time, letting her squirm. Finally, I said, "Is there someone else, Brielle?" The question hit her like a physical blow. She went pale, then red, then pale again. "Why would you ask that?" "Because you're glowing. Because you're happier than you've been in months. Even while you're asking for a separation. Because you smell like expensive cologne that I don't wear." She stared at me, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "I'm not. There's no one." She stopped, started again. "Even if there was, that's not why I want this separation. I want it because we're not good together anymore. But there is someone." It wasn't a question. She looked down at her hands and I saw her shoulders slump in defeat. "Yes," she whispered. "There is someone." "Who? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She was quiet for so long, I thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Porter Keller." I nodded like this was news to me. "How long?" 3 months. "Do you love him?" The question seemed to surprise her. She looked up at me, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I think so." "Yes." "And he loves you?" "He says he does. But he wants you to wait until his business deal closes before you leave me." Now she looked genuinely shocked. "How did you—" "I'm not stupid, Brielle. Disappointed maybe, hurt definitely, but not stupid." We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside I could hear kids playing in the street, the sound of normal families living normal lives. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure out how to untangle 15 years without destroying each other." "You're being very calm about this." "What's the alternative? Screaming? Throwing things? Would that change anything?" "No, I suppose not." "Then let's be adults about it." She looked relieved, like she'd expected me to fall apart or beg her to stay. Poor Brielle. She had no idea what was coming. "I'll talk to a lawyer next week," she said. "Start the paperwork." Good idea. I should probably do the same. Evan. Yes? I'm sorry. I never meant for it to happen this way. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. "I'm sure you didn't," I said. That night, after Brielle had gone to bed in the guest room, I made a phone call. "Environmental Protection Agency, how may I direct your call?" "I'd like to report a potential contamination issue at a construction site." The next morning was Saturday. Brielle left early to meet with her lawyer, or so she claimed. More likely, she was updating Porter on our conversation, planning their next moves. I drove to Iron Ring and found Miles in the gym, working with a young fighter who had potential but no discipline. "How'd it go?" he asked after sending the kid to work the speed bag. "She admitted everything, wants a separation." And now we move to phase 2. Miles grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." I spent the rest of the morning at the gym, working off frustration and anger on the heavy bag. Every punch was Porter's smug face, every combination a year of lies and betrayal. "You're getting better," Miles observed. "Faster, meaner." "Good. I'm going to need it." That afternoon, I got a call from Dolores at City Hall. "Mr. Mercer, you were asking about the Riverside development yesterday?" "Yes." "Well, you might be interested to know that the EPA is opening a formal investigation into soil contamination at the site. Someone filed a complaint." "Really? What does that mean for the project?" "Construction halt, pending environmental assessment. Could take months to resolve." I thanked her and hung up, then immediately called the local newspaper. "Riverton Gazette, this is Jennifer." "Hi, I'm calling about the Riverside Development Project. I heard there might be some environmental issues." "Environmental issues? What kind of issues?" "EPA investigation, construction halt, potential soil contamination, might be worth looking into." "Can I get your name?" "I'd prefer to remain anonymous, but you might want to call City Hall. Ask for Dolores in the permits office." I hung up and smiled. Porter's dream project was about to become his worst nightmare, and he had no idea it was coming. Sunday morning brought the first crack in Porter's perfect world. The Riverton Gazette's front page featured a story about the EPA investigation, complete with photos of the construction site and quotes from environmental experts about the potential dangers of building on contaminated soil. My phone rang at 8:30. "Evan?" Brielle's voice was tight with stress. "Have you seen the newspaper?" "No, why?" "There's a story about Porter's development project. EPA investigation. They've shut down construction." "That sounds serious." "It is serious. This could ruin him." "I'm sorry to hear that." There was a long pause. "You don't sound sorry." "What do you want me to say, Brielle? That I'm devastated your boyfriend's business is in trouble?" "He's not my boyfriend. It's complicated." "It's really not. You're married to me and sleeping with him. Pretty straightforward." She hung up without saying goodbye. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. "Is this Evan Mercer?" "Yes." "This is Porter Keller. I think we need to talk." I smiled. "I think you're right." We met at Riverside Park, a strip of green space overlooking Lake Erie, where families brought their kids to feed ducks and pretend the water wasn't too polluted for swimming. It was neutral ground, public enough to prevent violence, private enough for honest conversation. Porter was waiting by the picnic tables when I arrived, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in the past week. His usual polished appearance was cracked around the edges, wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, the kind of desperate exhaustion that came from watching your life fall apart in real time. "You look terrible," I said, sitting down across from him. "Thanks. You look better than I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Anger, maybe. Rage. The wronged husband routine. I shrugged. Rage is exhausting. I prefer strategy. Porter studied my face, trying to read my intentions. Brielle said you were taking this well. Too well. Brielle says a lot of things, not all of them true. She's a good woman, Evan. She doesn't want to hurt you. But she's willing to. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I leaned forward. You want my wife. She wants you. I'm the inconvenient obstacle standing in the way of your happiness. Porter was quiet for a moment, watching a family of ducks paddle across the lake. What do you want? I want the truth. What truth? How long have you been planning this? The affair, the separation, the whole thing? It wasn't planned. It just happened. Nothing just happens, Porter. You made choices. She made choices. Now I'm making choices. Something in my tone made him look at me more carefully. What kind of choices? Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo I'd taken at the construction site. Nice project you had going there. Past tense. His face went pale. You? You called the EPA? I called a lot of people. Amazing what you can accomplish when you have nothing left to lose. Porter stood up abruptly, hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might take a swing at me. I almost hoped he would. Miles had taught me how to handle men who were bigger but softer than me. You have no idea what you've done, he said. Sure I do. I've destroyed your business, ruined your reputation, made it impossible for you to support my wife in the style to which she'd like to become accustomed. That project represented 2 years of work, millions of dollars in investment. And now it represents nothing. I stood up too, meeting his eyes. Funny how quickly everything can change, isn't it? You're insane. I'm motivated. There's a difference. Porter turned and walked away, then stopped and came back. This doesn't change anything between Brielle and me. Doesn't it? She's a practical woman, Porter. Ambitious. She didn't leave her small-town mechanic husband to end up with an unemployed real estate developer. I'll rebuild. Find other projects. Will you? Because I did some research on your company's finances. Amazing what you can learn from public records. You leveraged everything on Riverside. Your house, your savings, your credit. When the investors pull out, and they will pull out, you'll be lucky to avoid bankruptcy. The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. His shoulders sagged, and suddenly he looked older, smaller, defeated. Why? He asked. Why destroy everything? It won't bring her back. I don't want her back, I said quietly. I want her to understand what she's throwing away, what she's choosing instead. And if I walk away, end things with Brielle, leave town, start over somewhere else, then you get to keep your kneecaps. Porter stared at me, trying to decide if I was serious. I let him wonder. You can't threaten me, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'm not threatening you. I'm explaining consequences. I stepped closer. You took something that belonged to me. Now I'm taking something that belongs to you. That's not a threat. It's justice. Brielle doesn't belong to you. She's not property. You're right. She's not property. She's a person who made promises to me, who built a life with me, who threw it all away for a fantasy. I smiled without warmth. But your business, your reputation, your financial future, those things can definitely be destroyed. Porter opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He was learning what I'd learned over the past few weeks. Sometimes there's nothing to say, nothing to do except absorb the damage and try to survive. This isn't over, he said finally. Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet. I walked back to my truck, leaving him standing by the lake, staring at the water like it might hold answers. In my rearview mirror, I watched him pull out his phone and make a call. Probably to Brielle, maybe to his lawyer. It didn't matter. The wheels were already in motion. That evening, Brielle confronted me in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd found the watch and the note that started this whole thing. "Porter told me about your conversation," she said. "Did he? What did he say?" "That you destroyed his business, that you threatened him. I prefer the term natural consequences. Evan, this is crazy. You can't what? Protect myself? Fight back? Refuse to be the victim?" She stared at me like I was a stranger. "This isn't you. You don't do things like this." "You're right. The old me didn't do things like this. The old me trusted people, believed in fairness, assumed that if I was a good husband and father, my family would be loyal in return." I sat down at the table. But the old me was naive. "So you're what, getting revenge?" "I'm leveling the playing field." "By destroying an innocent man's life?" "Innocent?" I laughed. "Porter knew you were married, knew you had a family. He pursued you anyway because he wanted what he wanted and didn't care about the consequences. That's not innocence. That's selfishness." Brielle was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, uncertain. "What happens now? Now you decide what you really want. A life with a man who can't provide for you, or a life with a man who won't. That's not fair." "Fair?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our neighborhood. Modest houses with modest dreams, the kind of place where people like me belonged. Was it fair when you started meeting him for coffee? Was it fair when you lied to me about working late? Was it fair when you planned your exit strategy without giving me a chance to fight for our marriage? You never meant to get caught. There's a difference. That night, Lacey came to my room. She knocked softly, then entered without waiting for permission, a teenage habit that usually annoyed me but tonight felt like a lifeline. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course." She sat on the edge of my bed, looking younger than her 16 years. "Mom's been crying. She won't tell me why, but I heard her on the phone with Aunt Monica." "What did you hear?" "Something about Porter losing his job, about you doing something to his business." She looked at me directly. "Did you?" I could have lied, should have lied. But I was tired of lies, tired of pretending everything was normal when our family was disintegrating. "Yes," I said. "Why?" "Because he was trying to take something that didn't belong to him. Mom, our family, our life together." Lacey was quiet for a while, processing this information with the serious concentration teenagers brought to adult problems. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" she asked. "Probably." "Because of Porter?" "Because of choices your mother made. Porter was just the excuse." "I don't understand." I sat down next to her, choosing my words carefully. "Sometimes people get tired of their lives. They start thinking the grass is greener somewhere else. They convince themselves they deserve better, different, more exciting." "Is that what Mom thinks?" "I think your mother fell in love with the idea of being someone else, someone more successful, more glamorous, more important than a small-town mechanic's wife." "But you're not just a mechanic. You're smart, you're funny, you fix things." The simple loyalty in her voice nearly broke me. "Thank you, sweetheart. But smart and funny don't pay for college or nice vacations or the kind of life your mother wants." "So she picked Porter because he has money?" "I think she picked Porter because he represented a different life, a better life, in her mind." "And now he doesn't have money anymore?" "Now he doesn't have anything anymore." Lacey considered this with the calculating intelligence she'd inherited from both her parents. "Good," she said finally. "Good? If he really loved Mom, he wouldn't have cared about his stupid business. He would have fought for her." She stood up. "But he didn't fight. He just gave up. That means he's weak." "And what do you think about me? Am I weak for fighting dirty?" Lacey smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. "I think you're scary when you're angry, but not weak. never weak. After she left, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about choices and consequences, about the man I used to be and the man I was becoming. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that even small-town mechanics could play hardball when everything they loved was at stake. Outside, it started to rain again, drumming against the windows like nature's applause for the first act of my revenge. But this was just the beginning. Porter's business was destroyed, but he was still in the picture. Brielle was wavering, but she hadn't made her final choice. The game was far from over. Monday morning brought news that spread through Riverton like wildfire in dry grass. Porter Development had filed for bankruptcy protection, citing the EPA investigation and the withdrawal of major investors. The Riverside project was officially terminated, leaving hundreds of workers unemployed and dozens of families who'd put deposits on dream homes holding worthless contracts. I learned about it at Murphy's Diner, where I'd gone for coffee and the kind of gossip that kept small towns running. The conversation at every table centered on Porter's spectacular fall from grace. "Heard he owes nearly $2 million, said Betty Murphy, the owner's wife, as she refilled my cup. "Banks are already moving to foreclose on his office building." "What about that fancy apartment of his?" asked Jim Kowalski from the next table. "Gone by Christmas, I'd bet. Man's got nothing left but debt and lawyers." I sipped my coffee and listened, feeling like a playwright watching his script performed exactly as written. Porter's destruction was more complete than I dared hope. But the real test would come when Brielle realized what her new life actually looked like. My phone buzzed with a text message from Miles. "Meet me at the gym. Urgent." I found him in his office, door closed, expression grim. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Porter Keller showed up here an hour ago looking for you." I sat down slowly. What did he want? "To settle things," he said. "Man to man." Miles cracked his knuckles. He was agitated, desperate, started making threats about what he'd do if he found you. "What kind of threats?" "The kind that made me ask him to leave, forcefully." "Did he leave?" "Eventually. But Evan, this guy's got nothing left to lose now. That makes him dangerous." I nodded, understanding the implications. A man with everything could be reasoned with, negotiated with, controlled through leverage. A man with nothing was unpredictable. "What do you think I should do?" "Lay low for a few days. Let him cool off. Maybe consider calling the police if he shows up again." "The police won't do anything unless he actually threatens me directly." "Then maybe it's time to end this thing. You've made your point. Porter's finished. Brielle's seen what her new life would look like. Mission accomplished." Miles was right, but I wasn't ready to declare victory yet. Porter might be financially ruined, but he still had one thing I wanted: my wife's misguided loyalty. As long as Brielle saw him as a victim instead of a predator, as long as she blamed me instead of him for the destruction of their fantasy, the job wasn't finished. I spent the afternoon at home, ostensibly working on paperwork for my struggling business, actually planning my next move. Brielle was at work, or claimed to be. These days, I assumed everything she told me was a lie until proven otherwise. Around 4 o'clock, Lacey came home from school with news that made my day considerably more interesting. "Jessica's mom heard that Mr. Keller got evicted from his apartment," she announced, dropping her backpack by the front door. "He's staying at the Riverside Motel." The Riverside Motel was Riverton's equivalent of Rock Bottom, a collection of run-down rooms that rented by the week to people who'd exhausted their other options. The irony of Porter ending up there, considering his failed development project bore the same name, was almost too perfect. "How does Jessica's mom know that?" I asked. "She works at the bank that foreclosed on his apartment. Says he came in begging for an extension, but they'd already changed the locks." That evening, Brielle came home looking like she'd aged 10 years in 10 hours. Her usual professional composure was cracked, revealing the stress and uncertainty underneath. "We need to talk," she said. "About what?" about ending this. Whatever you're doing to Porter, whatever game you're playing, it needs to stop. I'm not playing a game. I'm watching natural consequences unfold. Natural consequences? Her voice rose. You deliberately destroyed his business. You called the EPA, didn't you? I reported potential environmental violations. It's not my fault the violations turned out to be real. Don't lie to me, Evan. I know what you did. Do you? Then you know I did exactly what any reasonable person would do when they discovered their spouse was planning to abandon them for someone else. You ruined an innocent man's life. Innocent? I stood up, feeling anger surge through me like electricity. Porter knew you were married, knew you had a family. He pursued you anyway because he wanted what he wanted and didn't care about the cost. That's not innocence. That's predatory behavior. He loves me. He loves the idea of you. There's a difference. I walked closer, watching her face carefully. Tell me something, Brielle. Has Porter asked you to move in with him at the Riverside Motel? The question hit her like a slap. Her face went pale, then red, then pale again. How did you... Small town, people talk. So has he? Has your Prince Charming invited you to share his 12 by 12 room with the broken air conditioning and the stained carpet? His situation is temporary. His situation is permanent. He's 40 years old, bankrupt, unemployed, and unemployable. What bank is going to lend him money for another development project? What investor is going to trust him with their capital? He'll figure something out. He's resourceful. He's a failure. And deep down, you know it. Brielle stared at me with something approaching hatred. You did this. You destroyed him because you couldn't stand the thought of me being happy. I destroyed him because he was destroying my family. And you know what? It was easier than I expected. You want to know why? Because his whole life was built on borrowed money and borrowed time. All I did was call in the debt. You're not the man I married. You're right. The man you married was naive enough to trust you, weak enough to let you walk all over him, stupid enough to believe that being a good husband and father was enough to keep his family together. I smiled without warmth. That man is gone, Brielle. You helped destroy him. This is what grew in his place. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Porter, desperate and cornered, staying at a motel that charged by the week. Miles was right. Desperate men were dangerous, but they were also vulnerable. Around midnight, I got dressed and drove to the Riverside Motel. It was exactly as depressing as I'd expected, a horseshoe-shaped collection of rooms surrounding a cracked parking lot, neon sign flickering intermittently, the smell of desperation and disinfectant hanging in the air like fog. Porter's Porsche was parked in front of room 12, looking as out of place as a diamond in a garbage dump. I parked across the street and watched the room. The lights were on, and I could see shadows moving behind the thin curtains. After an hour, the door opened and Porter emerged. He looked around nervously, then got in his car and drove away. I waited 5 minutes, then followed. He drove to Brielle's office building downtown. Her car was in the parking lot, lights on in the conference room on the 3rd floor. I parked where I could see both the building and Porter's car, then settled in to wait. They met for 2 hours. I couldn't see what was happening, but I could imagine Porter pleading his case, promising that his setbacks were temporary, that they could still have their dream life together. Brielle torn between loyalty to a man she thought she loved and the growing realization that her fantasy was crumbling around her. When they finally emerged, they looked like two people who'd been through a war. Porter tried to kiss her goodbye, but Brielle turned her head, offering only her cheek. The gesture spoke volumes. I followed Porter back to the motel, then went home to find Brielle's car already in the driveway. She was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea, staring at nothing. "How was your evening?" I asked. "Fine." "Work late again?" "Yes." "Productive meeting?" She looked up at me sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." just making conversation. But she knew. I could see it in her eyes, the growing suspicion that I was watching, waiting, cataloging every lie and every betrayal. Good. Let her feel what I'd felt for months. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything. "Mr. Mercer, this is Detective Williams with the Riverton Police Department. We need to speak with you about Porter Keller." My stomach dropped. "What about him?" "He's been making threats. Against you, specifically. We'd like you to come in and file a report." An hour later, I was sitting in a small room at the police station, telling Detective Williams about my complicated relationship with Porter Keller. I left out the part about deliberately destroying his business. No point in volunteering information that might complicate things. "He came to your gym yesterday?" the detective asked, reviewing his notes. "That's what my friend Miles told me. I wasn't there." "And he made specific threats against you?" "According to Miles, yes. Something about settling things, man to man." "Has he contacted you directly?" "We had one conversation at Riverside Park. He was upset about his business troubles, but he didn't threaten me then." Detective Williams nodded and closed his notebook. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to be direct with you. Mr. Keller is in a bad situation. Lost his business, his home, his savings. Men in that position sometimes do desperate things." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you be careful. Avoid contact with him. If he approaches you or tries to communicate, call us immediately." "Do you think he's dangerous?" "I think he's unpredictable, and unpredictable people are always dangerous." I left the police station feeling like I'd crossed another line. Involving law enforcement meant the game was escalating beyond financial and social warfare into something potentially physical. The thought should have scared me. Instead, it felt like validation. That afternoon, Brielle confronted me again. "The police called Porter," she said. "They told him to stay away from you." "Good. I don't want to see him any more than he wants to see me." "Evan, this has gone too far. You've destroyed his life, humiliated him publicly, and now you're trying to have him arrested. I'm trying to protect myself from a man who's made threats against me." "What threats? When?" "Ask your boyfriend, or better yet, ask Miles. He was there." Brielle was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, uncertain. "Porter's not violent. He wouldn't hurt anyone. Desperate people do desperate things, Brielle. And thanks to his own choices, Porter is about as desperate as a man can get." "His own choices? You mean your sabotage?" "I mean his decision to pursue a married woman. His decision to leverage everything on a risky development project. His decision to build his business on borrowed money and borrowed time." I looked at her directly. "I didn't make those choices for him." "But you took advantage of them." "I exposed them. There's a difference." That night, I lay in bed listening to Brielle pace the floor in the guest room, her phone buzzing with calls and text messages. Porter, probably, trying to salvage what was left of their relationship. Or maybe her sister Monica, offering advice and support. It didn't matter. The endgame was approaching, and I could feel it like a storm building on the horizon. Porter was desperate, cornered, potentially dangerous. Brielle was wavering between loyalty and self-preservation. And I was ready to finish what I'd started. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that even small-town mechanics could play chess with the best of them. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The old Evan would have rolled over and played victim. The new Evan was writing his own ending to this story, and it was going to be spectacular. The call came at 6 a.m, jarring me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. "Evan?" Brielle's voice was tight with panic. "Porter's missing." I sat up in bed, instantly alert. "Missing how?" "He didn't check out of the motel. His car's still there, but he's gone. The manager found his room door standing open." "Did you call the police?" "They're looking for him, but Evan..." Her voice broke slightly. "What if he does something stupid? What if he hurts himself? The concern in her voice told me everything I needed to know about where her loyalties still lay. Even after everything, the lies, the betrayal, the systematic destruction of her fantasy life, she was still worried about Porter. "I'm sure he's fine," I said. "Probably just went for a walk to clear his head." At 5 a.m, with all his belongings still in the room? Desperate people do unpredictable things. "Stop saying that," she snapped. "Stop talking about him like he's some kind of animal. He's a good man who made some mistakes. Good men don't seduce other people's wives. Good husbands don't destroy their wives' happiness out of spite." We hung up without saying goodbye, the conversation ending the way most of our interactions did these days, with anger and accusations and the growing certainty that our marriage was beyond salvage. I got dressed and drove to the Riverside Motel. Police cars were parked outside room 12, and I could see Detective Williams talking to the manager. Porter's Porsche sat in the parking lot like evidence of a life interrupted. I parked across the street and watched the activity. After 20 minutes, Detective Williams emerged from the room and walked over to his car. I got out of my truck and approached him. "Any word on Porter?" I asked. "Nothing yet. His room looks like he left in a hurry. Clothes scattered around, suitcase half packed." Williams studied my face carefully. "Where were you last night, Mr. Mercer?" "Home with my family. Why?" "Just covering all the bases. This situation has everyone on edge." "You think something happened to him?" "I think a man in his position might do something reckless. We're checking the lake, the bridges, anywhere someone might go to. Think things through." The implication was clear. They thought Porter might hurt himself, might see ending his life as the only way out of the hole he'd dug. The thought should have bothered me more than it did. "I hope you find him," I said, and meant it. Porter needed to face the consequences of his choices, not escape them. "Mr. Mercer, if he contacts you, if he shows up at your house or business, call us immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself." Understood. I drove home to find Brielle pacing the kitchen like a caged animal, phone pressed to her ear. "Any word?" she asked when she saw me. "Police are looking, checking the lake and bridges." Her face went white. "You think he might—" "I think he might do anything. That's what makes this situation dangerous." "This is your fault," she said quietly. "If something happens to him, it's on you." "No, Brielle. If something happens to him, it's on him. I didn't force him to pursue a married woman. I didn't force him to leverage everything on a risky business deal. I didn't force him to make threats against me. You destroyed him systematically, deliberately. I defended myself. There's a difference." Lacey appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, looking younger than her 16 years. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Why are you guys fighting so early?" Brielle and I looked at each other, neither wanting to explain the situation to our daughter. "Porter's missing," Brielle said finally. "We're worried about him." "Missing how?" "He left his motel room sometime during the night. No one knows where he went." Lacey processed this information with the calculating intelligence she'd inherited from both parents. "Maybe he just left town," she said. "Maybe he realized he couldn't win and decided to start over somewhere else." "People don't abandon their cars when they leave town," Brielle replied. "They do if they can't afford the payments anymore." The simple logic of it hit Brielle like a physical blow. She stared at our daughter, seeing her own situation reflected in Porter's, the gradual realization that dreams built on borrowed money and borrowed time always collapsed eventually. My phone rang. Miles. "You need to get down here," he said without preamble. "Now." "What's wrong?" "Just get here. And Evan, come alone." I found Miles waiting in the Iron Ring parking lot, expression grim. "He's inside," Miles said. "Who's inside?" "Porter." Been here since about 4 this morning, sitting in your truck waiting for you to show up. I looked through the gym's front window and saw him, Porter Keller, sitting on a bench near the heavy bags, staring at nothing. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 days. What does he want? To talk, he says. But Evan, the man's not right. He's been rambling about justice and consequences and settling scores. I think he might be having some kind of breakdown. Did you call the police? Not yet. Thought you should know first. Miles grabbed my arm. But if you go in there, I'm going with you. No, this is between me and him. Evan, this started with me and him. It needs to end the same way. I walked into the gym slowly, hands visible, trying to project calm confidence despite the adrenaline flooding my system. Porter looked up when he heard the door, and I saw something in his eyes that made my stomach clench. The flat, empty stare of a man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Hello, Porter. Evan. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been screaming. Thank you for coming. Miles said you wanted to talk. I want to understand. He stood up slowly, and I noticed his clothes were wrinkled, dirty, like he'd been sleeping outside. I want to understand how a small-town mechanic managed to destroy my entire life in less than 2 weeks. I didn't destroy your life. I exposed it. Exposed what? The fact that it was built on nothing. Borrowed money, borrowed time, borrowed happiness. Porter laughed, but there was no humor in it. Borrowed happiness. That's good, that's very good. Porter, people are looking for you. Your disappearance has everyone worried. Are you worried, Evan? Are you concerned about my well-being? I'm concerned about what you might do. What I might do. He walked closer, and I fought the urge to step back. What do you think I might do? I think you might make another bad decision. Add to the pile of mistakes that brought you here. Mistakes. He nodded slowly. Yes, I made mistakes. I fell in love with another man's wife. I trusted that my business was solid. I believed that good things happened to good people. He stopped directly in front of me. But you know what my biggest mistake was? What? Underestimating you. Thinking you were just another small-town loser who'd roll over and let me take what I wanted. And now? Now I know better. Now I understand that you're exactly what Brielle said you were. What did Brielle say I was? Dangerous when cornered, ruthless when threatened, capable of anything when you have nothing left to lose. The description surprised me with its accuracy. Is that what she said? She's terrified of you, Evan, terrified of what you've become, what you might do next. She should be terrified of what she's done, what she's thrown away. Porter was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like he was trying to memorize it. I loved her, he said finally. No, you didn't. You loved the idea of her, the fantasy of stealing another man's wife and getting away with it. And what do you love, Evan? What drives a man to destroy someone so completely? Justice. Justice? Porter laughed again, that same empty sound. You call this justice? I call it consequences. You took something that didn't belong to you. I took something that didn't belong to you. My business, my reputation, my future. None of those things belonged to you. They were all built on other people's money, other people's trust, other people's dreams. Porter stared at me for what felt like forever. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket. I tensed, ready to fight or run, but he only pulled out an envelope. This is for Brielle, he said, holding it out. What is it? A letter, an explanation, an apology. I took the envelope, noting how his hands shook. Porter, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she deserves better than what I could give her. Better than what either of us could give her. Where are you going? Away. Far away. Somewhere I can start over without the ghost of Porter Keller following me around. The police are looking for you. Let them look. By the time they figure out I'm gone, I'll be someone else entirely." He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "You won, Evan. Completely, thoroughly, devastatingly. I hope it was worth it." It was. And Brielle? What happens to her now? That's up to her. She can choose to rebuild what we had, or she can choose to live with the consequences of what she threw away. Porter nodded slowly. "You really are dangerous, aren't you? Only to people who threaten what's mine. And if she chooses to leave anyway? If she decides she can't forgive what you've done? Then she'll discover what you just discovered, that actions have consequences, that choices matter, that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes it's just different shades of brown." Porter walked out of the gym without another word. I watched through the window as he got into his Porsche and drove away, probably for the last time. Miles appeared beside me. "Think we'll see him again?" "No. He's finished here. Finished everywhere, probably." "And Brielle?" "Brielle's about to learn what her choices really cost." I drove home with Porter's letter on the passenger seat, feeling like a general who'd won a war but wasn't sure the victory was worth the battlefield it had created. Our house looked the same from the outside, but everything inside had changed irrevocably. Brielle was waiting in the living room, still in her robe, eyes red from crying. "The police called," she said. "Porter's car was found at the bus station. He's gone." "I know. I saw him." "You saw him? Where? When?" I handed her the envelope. "He asked me to give you this." She opened it with trembling hands and read silently, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she looked up at me with something approaching hatred. "Are you satisfied now?" she asked. "Are you?" "He's gone, ruined, probably never coming back. You got what you wanted." "What I wanted was my wife back. What I got was justice." "Justice?" She stood up, letter clutched in her hand. "You destroyed a good man's life out of spite. I defended my family from a predator. He loved me. He used you, and you let him because it felt good to be wanted by someone successful, someone who could give you the life you thought you deserved." Brielle stared at me, and I saw the exact moment she realized the truth, that her fantasy was over, that Porter was gone, that her choices had led her exactly where they were always going to lead her. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now, you decide what you really want. A marriage with a man who fought for you, or a divorce from a man who exposed your betrayal. Some choice. It's the only choice you have left. The other options disappeared when you decided to throw away 15 years for a fantasy." She was quiet for a long time, staring at Porter's letter like it held answers to questions she was afraid to ask. "I can't forgive what you did to him," she said finally. "And I can't forgive what you did to us. So where does that leave us?" "It leaves us exactly where your choices brought us, at the end." Brielle nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting this moment for weeks. "I'll call my lawyer tomorrow," she said. "Good. I'll call mine too." She walked upstairs without another word, leaving me alone in our living room with the wreckage of our marriage scattered around me like debris from a tornado. Outside, it started to rain again, drumming against the windows like nature's applause for the final act of my revenge. Porter was gone, probably forever. Brielle had chosen her path, and I was finally free to become whoever I was supposed to be next. The old Evan would have felt guilty, would have wondered if he'd gone too far, pushed too hard, destroyed too much. But the old Evan was gone, buried under months of lies and betrayal and the systematic dismantling of everything he'd believed about love and loyalty and family. This Evan, the one who'd learned to fight back, who'd discovered that nice guys could finish first if they were smart enough and ruthless enough, this Evan felt only satisfaction. Justice wasn't always pretty, but it was always necessary. And sometimes, when you'd lost everything that mattered, It was the only victory left worth winning.